back. So as I was saying, this band's self-titled album, also sometimes known as the Brown Album, although the band themselves didn't call it that. It was released September 22nd, 1969. It's currently 38 on Best Ever Albums of the 60s. And we pretty much we covered music from Big Pink in a couple episodes ago, and we're picking up right where we left off from that. They had a lot of success from music from Big Pink, and after the release of that album, they went on tour. They played at Woods. Yep.
Can I bring something up?
Yes.
You know who really liked the band, Josh?
Lots of people. But
Rolling Stone magazine. Because if you go back and do it, it's almost like over the top, their love of the band.
Yes, that was pointed out that they probably were like one of the most highly praised bands at the time in Rolling Stone.
In the research I do for these albums, I'm always amazed how often they are brought up.
Yeah. After the release of this album, they went on tour and they played at Woodstock in the summer of '69, but they did not appear in the film due to legal complications. I don't know exactly what those complications were. They then also played with Bob Dylan, at the Isle of Wight Festival that same year. And then they decided that they wanted to go out to LA to record their second album. Basically, I heard they just didn't really want to experience the winter in New York, and they wanted to go out to the sun and avoid all the snow and everything. So
good call.
Yeah. So they went out to LA and they rented Sammy Davis Jr.'s pool house as the place to make this album. They made the basement into a studio. Not the basement, I'm sorry. They made the pool house into a studio, and basically Robbie Robertson said they wanted it to be like a hangout vibe or have a clubhouse feel to making the album, so that, you know, everything happened there. They could just hang out. They would hang out or sleep during the day, and they would basically start making music at night and play all through the morning. And
so can I be aspirational, Josh?
Yes.
When the world returns to semi-normal after the pandemic, can we do a road trip and rent the Rat Pack's basement for a Combing the Stacks episode just record there?
Yeah, I mean, they have the exact address of where it is, and it's in Hollywood, and Hollywood Hills.
Is it like an Airbnb now?
Probably. It's probably really expensive, though. It was also owned by other famous people throughout. I think Judy Garland, I think I saw as well. Anyway, so yeah, that's what they wanted it to feel like. They didn't want to have to worry about people, you know, getting late, coming in late. Everyone was there. It was just a chill place to record music. The album itself was recorded in approximately 4 weeks, although they did record some songs in New York City after the fact for the album. The extraordinary thing about this album is that many members of the band play different instruments depending on the song. For example, on Rag Mama Rag, the drummer sings and plays mandolin. The pianist is on the drums for that song, and the bassist plays the fiddle, the organist plays piano, and even the producer is on tuba on that album.
Well, isn't Levon Helm normally the drummer a lot of times, and he sings a lot too? So
yeah, well, that's kind of the thing, right? Because they have 3 different singers. They all kind of rotate playing different instruments and stuff, depending on what the needs are for the song. Famously on this, go ahead.
I also found out why the band was not on the Woodstock film. Josh, if you want to know.
Please tell me. Yes.
So they were apparently offered only half of their fee for the rights to their performance. And basically their manager said, yeah, no way. You got to give us our full fee if you want it on there. Okay. They thought that the show, unlike some other bands, most notably CCR and Grateful Dead, who didn't think their sets were that good. That's why it wasn't on there. And take this with a grain of salt due to what we know about their adversarial relationship later. But yes. Levon Helm claimed that one of the reasons they didn't want the set on was because Robbie Robertson's microphone had been inadvertently left on and he wasn't much of a singer.
Okay. All right. Well, interesting.
Damn.
Yeah,
Real
There you
talk.
go.
I'll get into that tension between them in a little bit. Also famously on this album, the band members play horns, even though most of them didn't know how to play horns. So this really is a testament to their versatility as a band and their willingness to, all be multi-instrument players and do whatever it takes to make a good song. And this also gets to the egalitarian approach to their music making. They all knew what their roles were, but they were all flexible enough to change according to what worked best for the song. The band was featured on the cover of Time magazine during this time period, January 12th, 1970 edition, and they were the first group after the Beatles to be featured on the Time magazine, only the second group to do that. John Simon was the producer on this album and music from Big Pink, and he plays the tuba on multiple tracks on this album, and is often considered an unofficial member of the band. Robbie Robertson gets full credit or co-writing credit on every song on this album, and that would become a bone of contention between him and Levon Helm later on in terms of royalties, and that helped break up the band to a certain extent. The album peaked at number 9 on the pop album charts. Rag Mama Rag was the single and hit 57, and Up on Cripple Creek hit 15 on the pop singles charts. In 2009, the album was added to the National Recording Registry in the United States for its importance and influence. The album cover itself is of note. It seems very influential to future bands with its sepia tone and them looking all formal and like they're from an old picture or something. The album itself was almost titled America at one point, and you can definitely understand why they would think that, listening to the albums. Like we discussed before with Dylan's John Wesley Harding and the Bird Sweetheart of the Rodeo, the band stayed in the rustic rural Americana vibe on this album, when many bands of the time, many that we've talked about, were into psychedelia. So they really, like Dylan and the Byrds, they really went their own direction and did not do what everyone else was doing. And I think that's why this album is very influential to a lot of people. It was initially conceived of as a concept album. Many of the songs on the album all discuss about the South, the Civil War, farmers, truckers, various things to that extent. And Eric Clapton and George Harrison both cited this band as the band as a major influence, and they appear, well, not George Harrison, but Eric Clapton appears on the Last Waltz album and music movie. The music, I think one of the things, and of course they go on to influence pretty much like every Americana band ever, leading to the Eagles, Avett Brothers, Mumford and Sons, Ryan Adams, Drive-By Truckers, Hold Steady, Counting Crows, Black Crows. The list goes on, but those are some of the ones that have cited them specifically. So that's about the album. Since this is the only other time we're talking about the band, I have stuff that happened after the fact, but let's get into your all's thoughts first. And John, what did you think of the band?
So at the most basic sense, here's how I'd analyze this. The music on this album is excellent. The singing on this album is a detriment. And that's the best way I could describe it. I know that you mentioned that a little bit, Josh, the last time we talked about it, but boy, was it the case here, because I feel like the singing is worse on this album than music from Big Pink, and the musicianship is exceptional. What stood out, the drumming is fantastic on this album. There's a lot of lead guitar parts by Robbie Robertson that are just long enough to be memorable, but get out of there right away so they don't overwhelm stuff. And it's like the musicianship truly shows that this is the band, right? Because at different parts, it's almost it's almost like one of those things when a lead singer will go through his entire band and point out, like, on the drums, on the bass, you know, and stuff like that. That's what it kind of feels like with some of the band's tracks, because the drums shine through, the lead guitar shines through, the bass lines are solid, but subtle as well. The keys and the organ are really prominent on this album, even more so than music from Big Pink.
Yeah,
and
that's Garth Hudson on organ.
Yeah, he was I believe, isn't he the music teacher as well? He got the stipend for
right.
being
I didn't
there.
see that.
Yes,
Yeah.
their
$10 a week.
Their music theory instructor. Yes, and I can see why they wanted him, because he was excellent. The band are never going to be my favorite type of music, and I think I've showed, I wouldn't say a bias, but it's Americana type music is not my favorite. I'm happy to know that they're such strong Union supporters, because that came up quite a bit in the lyrics. But the lyrics are a lot of times they're very direct, and they tell a very specific story. And I wouldn't say the band or the level of songwriters like a Bob Dylan that can add twist to that narrative, you know, like he did in John Wesley Harding, which for Bob Dylan was a pretty simplistic album, but looks like advanced calculus compared to some of the songs here. It's not to say the songs are bad, they're just direct and linear and slice of life, so to speak. And
they paint a good picture, I would say.
They do. They paint a very specific picture of like life in a specific place with a certain type of guy. But yeah, I would say slight recommend for this, because I do think that the how they sound and all of the parts, it's a great album to listen to on headphones. It's a great album even to listen to not on headphones, because you can pick out all of the different parts. And kind of like how I talk about jazz, where I could listen to an album and just listen to a specific instrument. This is a great example of that, because I kind of did listen to this for the drums one time, because it stood out to me in the first, and I said, okay, the second time I listened to this, let me just hear the drum parts that Levon Helm is doing. And there's some really interesting fills and choices in terms of his drum work that I really appreciate, because not everybody would play it the same way. So shout out to him, and shout out to the keys as well and the organ, because it's very good, and it's always welcome when it comes in. And it's in many ways it serves almost like the bass line to the music, because it ties everything together. But the vocals, all I could think of is if they just had a better singer, and then they got 3 of them, but for whatever reason, none of them were clicking for me on this album, like, you know, the previous album where it wasn't as noticeable. So there's my initial takes.
Nice, Matt. What did you think?
So in the previous episode we covered music from Big Pink, I had mentioned that, you know, how much I love the band, and I did like that album. And I think I mentioned kind of later on in that episode how, while I thought that some of the song, like the structures of the songs, weren't as strong as I think that they could have been, like something like The Wait, right? That was just that's like a perfect song for me. But I was more taken with that record just because the overall the sonic template that the band was putting forth, but the songs weren't hitting as much for me. But I still, it was almost like good background music in a way that I just like the overall texture that they're going with. This album is a different level for me, because I think that this is a great representation of the songs being much more consistent. You know, them really capitalizing on their talent as musicians, in addition to having the songs to back that up, because this is a much more interesting album. John, I think on the previous record you were talking about how it didn't really connect with you emotionally, and I could totally see that. You know, I know what you mean by that. To me, this is a much more of an emotional connection. And when you got a song like Up on Cripple Creek, which is like it's like a funk song, like they're doing funk on this record, right? Which is, and that to me, that might be a better song than The Wait, and that's just such a great track. I get, John, what you're saying about the vocals, and I can't argue with that, only because it makes sense, right? Because when you've got Danko and, to me, particularly Danko and Manuel, that really have that kind of high pitched. They're not really classically trained vocalists or anything like that. It's a much more raw sound. I think Levon Helm probably has more of a direct kind of a rock vocalist, you know.
You know what it sounds like to me, and I'm sorry to interject here, but I have to do it. A lot of times, like the vocals on the band sound a lot like when you listen to like Schoolhouse Rock back in the day, like so like that's the best way I can describe it, like that, like over the top, like I'm just a bill, like over to, and it's like a little bit of that, like it's like
Capitol Hill,
and it's like, and that's kind of like when you think of that, it's kind of like what the song is. It's like like Rag Mama Rag, like it's like I'm thinking of the different tracks now, and I'm like, shit, that's like what it sounds like to me. And I don't know if they were influenced. I'll have to see if I can clean
Schoolhouse Rock influence on the band. Yeah,
but that's
And I get that, right? And that I am not gonna. I personally, I'm totally fine with it. I've listened to the band for a while, and I'm used to that. So and I really appreciate all the other things that they're doing, like the musicianship, the fact that they're doing so much here with the horns and the keyboards and the, just how everything is put together. I love this record, and there was a lot on this that I didn't really know before. Jemima Surrender, I really liked.
Yeah,
that reminded
awesome.
me. I heard that there's like that guitar part on there. That sounds like Wilco to me. It sounds like a Jeff Tweedy Wilco song that they would totally be doing nowadays, and that's one of the reasons why I like this record too, is because there's stuff on here that you could. Again, we're talking about timeless, non-dated stuff. This is all over the place.
Jawbone for sure is timeless, non-dated. Yeah,
actually, Jawbone might be my least favorite song in this record.
Oh,
really? I totally disagree with that. It's probably my second favorite after Up on Cripple Creek, which I consider to be. I know.
You know what? It's. I don't hate it. I'm fine with it. I think I think the chorus just. It doesn't do it for me. It doesn't resolve the way that I would like it to. But it's still a good song. It just, I think at that point in the record, it starts to tail off a little bit for me.
Wow, that's the total opposite of how I felt about that. It brought it back to life for me, because Look Out Cleveland was like my least favorite song.
Oh, I like that. No, I like that one. Okay, all right, we got some differences here. So Rag Mama Rag is great. I don't
love that one either.
That's good old fashioned. That's
I like what
shit kicking music, John.
Not for me. I love what's above and beyond it, like The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. That's great. It's like a spiritual almost, and Across the Great Divide's an interesting first track, but I enjoyed it. But Rag Mama Rag was like the worst impulses of the band, I feel like, and the worst impulses of Americana a little bit too. It's like. Yeah.
No, I like to me that's a fun song. That's just roots rock. It's great. I like the piano part on that. I like the horns. Yep. Whispering Pines, I think that's a beautiful song. That's just a very pretty kind of ballad thing going on there. And I don't know. This to me was a much bigger step up from the previous record. I get what you're saying about
I agree.
the
vocals. With you. Yep.
I get what you're saying about the vocals, and if this isn't your genre, I get that. But this is such an important band that just did so much with that movement, really, that Americana movement. And I'm curious to what Josh thinks, because you are hearing a lot more Levon Helm on this record. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I did know that I wanted to point out was, when you look at the Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, I saw a story that Robbie Robertson wrote that song after talking with Levon Helm's dad. Because Levon, remember, everybody was Canadian in this band except Levon Helm. He was, I forget what state he was from, but he was a Southerner. And I guess he talked to, Robbie Robertson had a late night, conversation with Levon Helm's dad, who was talking a little bit nostalgic about the Confederacy, and he
Southern hospitality with a little bit of racism,
just a tad. Yeah. And so Robbie Robertson wrote the song, after having that conversation, and that was another thing that Levon Helm was like, "What the hell? You're writing about my, my dad's, you're ripping this from my dad." So that I think that was another part of their contention. But I love this record. This was a really fun listen, and this is it's a very different listen than their previous one, and I think a fairly significant step up.
I agree with both of you, actually. I think this album is a step up from the first album, and as lukewarm as I was on the first album, I'm the opposite on this album. I really like this album. This album is often considered their best album, and I can see why. Like John said, it sounds fantastic on headphones. I recommend that. You get a lot of the detail of the different things going on. And I love all of the songs. They do just their versatility, that musician versatility on this, and how they try so many different things, like the clavinet with the wah wah pedal on Cripple Creek that gives it that funk sound. That's one of the first songs to do that, and those are the things that like really set this album apart from other albums. It turns out I think it's Richard Manuel that I don't like as a singer. I noticed that, and when I went back and looked at the songs from the first album, his voice, it's like too high and like not as like sonorous, I guess, as the other guys, and I don't mind Danko and Levon Helm as much.
See, that's interesting, because I find Danko and Manuel have they're similar to me. I mean, I can pick them apart, but I think that they kind of have a similar vibe. So, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So like John said, that the music is better on here, across the board, and I didn't find, although, I noticed the different who was singing, I paid more attention to, but I didn't find the voices distracting.
Would you say this
is
is
a couple songs? Yeah.
Would you say this is a better example of why people think the band are virtuoso musicians in the first album? Because that was a big takeaway for me. Like, it's like, okay, I kind of get it now more than I did in the first one.
I think this album exemplifies why they were so popular and what people like about them, for sure. I thought Danko sounded like Adam Duritz on one song, on When You Awake. And I feel like and I feel like Manuel sounds like Wayne Coyne on Whispering Pines. Well, I wrote that down.
Now I'm thinking of the band doing like A Long December or something. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
I know. And so I love all of the different instruments on this album. The fact that they can incorporate saxophones and fiddles and mandolins and all these different things and play them, relatively well. I think it's hilarious that the producer comes in on tuba on multiple songs as a bass line. That's hilarious. Matt, the Jawbone song is in 6/4 time signature, so maybe you just don't like songs in 6/4 time signature.
He does. Actually, it's funny you say that, because he doesn't, based on other stuff that we've talked about, that time structure. Yeah, no, honest to God, it's like,
what else has that?
Oh gosh,
I'll have to look it up.
Like, I can bring up. I'll next time for cleaning the stacks, I'll bring up.
I just found that the chorus, the piano part in the chorus, it didn't do anything for me, really. I was like, okay, like I was expecting and wanting more, and I don't know how else to explain it. And maybe it was a time signature. I've never thought of that before, but yeah,
it really grabbed me. Like John said, it kind of brought me back to the album.
To give you some modern examples of 6/4 time signature, to give you an idea of what it sounds like, I just quickly pulled it up, just to give you some examples that you would know, Matt. Fell on Black Days by Soundgarden.
Oh, I like that song.
Damn That River by Alice in Chains.
I don't know if I know that song.
You don't know that? Do you know Synchronicity No. 1 by The Police? That's another good example.
I like that one. Yeah. That's good.
Okay. So maybe you do, but like you like what it became later. Yeah. So,
and like I didn't hate it. I found, like, up until that point, I pretty much loved every song, and that was the first song.
Do you the thing I always think of with well, that's more like 7 and 4, Money by Pink Floyd, but it's similar. It's a similar type of. Yeah.
I like that one too. Anyway,
okay, all right.
What else? Gangstar sampled the rhythm track on Up on Cripple Creek on their song Beyond.
God, that's so good. I'm surprised more people
you're right. They did. Wow, I never put 2 and 2 together on that, but you were 100% right, Josh.
I immediately listened to that after I listened.
Yes,
to
that makes total sense, though, doesn't it? I mean, that's totally like something out of hip hop, that you could sample in hip hop.
It was really good. But yeah, I think overall this album is stronger, and I appreciated it more, and there was enough interesting things in it that I felt it's well worth a listen, and it moved up they moved up in my estimation because of it.
Another famous 6/4 song, Here Comes the Sun, Matt. So
it's one of my favorite George Harrison song.
Well, it's one of my favorite structures, which is why I know 6/4 so much. So like That's why.
Yeah,
okay,
I don't
maybe
think,
I'm
I don't
wrong.
think
Maybe you
it's-
do
I don't
like
think
it.
it's
Maybe you
that.
do like it. Just
Yeah, I don't
say,
think it's that. It just, I don't know. That's just something about it. I was like, it was fine. It was fine. It just wasn't, up until that point, I was like, I loved every song, and that was the first one that I was kind of left a little flat. But I do love the album cover, and the fact that, like, it does look like, if you just put some caps on these dudes and threw some muskets in their hands, I mean, they're going off to fight in Gettysburg, or something like that. It's very, very Civil War.
Or playing that local venue in your hipster small town as well as like the musical act for the night. Yes, one of the two. So you can go either way with that.
I mean, that is the aesthetic, right, for a lot of Americana bands.
Yes, you could just see the craft beer like out of
PBR.
PBR is not craft beer, but
no, not PBR. No, PBR's for like the Strokes vibe. You know what I mean? I'm talking. This is where like they in their backyard. You know what I mean? They have like
selling,
hipsters love their PBR.
Yeah, selling couture denim or something.
Let's not keep going down that road. These guys aren't hipsters. These guys are they're a different genre. They're like beer dad. We'll save that for another conversation. But
man.
I just have to challenge that because no, PBR is not like what the band is. The band is more like I have a hoppy beer that I created in my backyard as a hobby. So
I would like to try that beer.
All right. So some wrap-up facts for the band. They released some more albums after this. Tensions in the band started to rise. Robertson started to take more control of the band, and this created tension between him and Levon Helm especially. On the other hand, Robertson says he took more control because Helm, Danko, and Manuel were all using heroin so much. And alcohol also came into play a lot. With Manuel and some of the other guys as well. They released some more albums. They released a live album in '72 called Rock of Ages. Their album immediately after this self-titled band was called Cahoots, which in retrospect I guess has gained some more acclaim. They became the backing band for Bob Dylan again in '73 and on the Planet Waves album that Dylan released, and they went on tour with him in '74. And then in '75 they created their own studio in Malibu called Shangri-La and released an album off of that, which was all original material. In '76 the Last Waltz movie concert occurred and was basically Robertson's idea, and he wanted to basically stop touring and break up the band and go out on a high note. Manuel during this time had also suffered a neck injury during a boating accident in Texas, and that could have influenced the decision as well. However, I think Helm, after the fact or in his biography, said that this was all Robertson's idea, and he felt like Robertson was basically forcing the band to break up when maybe they didn't want to. So there's that bone of contention. Apropos, the last
jawbone of contention.
Yeah. Apropos, the Last Waltz took place on Thanksgiving Day at the Wonderland Ballroom in '76. It was, famously directed by Martin Scorsese and has a whole host of guest stars, including Dylan, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Eric Clapton, Van Morrison's there, Neil Diamond, and many others.
And special appearance by Neil Young's Coke bubble nose.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
You ever see that? There's like a big, you could see the big Coke, like in the unedited version. There's like, when Neil Young plays, there's like a big like hunk of Coke in his nostril while he's playing. So,
oh, wow.
There you go.
Well, I'm going to have to go back and watch that on Zoom. The film itself was released in '78 alongside a 3 LP soundtrack. This is also where the songwriting credit dispute starts to occur between Helm and Robertson. Levon Helm said that the songwriting was developed in collaboration with the members of the band, despite Robertson getting sole songwriting credit on all the albums, and that translates into royalties. So that's where that was a lifelong thing between them. In '83, the band resumed touring without Robertson, who went solo and became a Hollywood music producer. I think Matt mentioned that, or John mentioned that last time. And then in 1986, Richard Manuel committed suicide in his hotel room. Rick Danko died of heart failure in 1999, and then Helm was diagnosed with throat cancer in 98, but was able to regain his voice and lived until 2012. So Robertson and Garth Hudson, yes, thank you, are the only two left in the band. And finally, in 1994, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they reunited with the exception of Levon Helm, who did not attend because Robertson was there. So.
Yeah, I thought I read somewhere or saw somewhere that like actually at a point where Robertson bought out some of the other members their publishing or rights or whatever. So because that definitely was an issue. I think that he was upset with everybody else's drug use and alcohol use, and he was much more of a, like let's produce stuff, let's do movie scores, let's do all this other stuff, and the other guys he felt is holding him back. And I think at one point he actually bought some of the rights to their for probably not much money, the guys, right. So I think that might have been part of it too. But it's really, I from what I understand, it was a very sad ending, and it was one of those things that Helm, I think, eviscerated Robertson in his biography, and until the day he died, he blamed him for the death of Manuel and for Danko, that it was his fault for breaking up the band and all this stuff. And and Robertson went on to do movies with Scorsese and did all this other stuff and made a bunch of money, and everybody else was kind of off to the side. So it's very sad.
Yeah, they were never as successful after the fact. Especially after Robertson left, they kind of had to. I saw that they had to play these, smaller venues, and they were often not even they were opening bands for other acts, and they never really regained their status. So so this is the high point, though, to end on a if you're gonna listen to one band album, I'd say it was this one, although I haven't heard any of their later albums, to be fair, so I can't say if they're good or not.
These two that we covered are supposed to be the quintessential ones. They were also, I think this was like when Rolling Stone did their new updated list, this was like in 50, and Songs from Big Pink was like 100 or whatever. So they're still, highly regarded records. But I agree. I think this one is much superior than Songs from Big Pink.
Yeah.